Welcome to Think Fast, where we will talk only about Ranbir and Alia this week. That's the
Oh,
only thing I am obsessed about, and that's the only thing I want to
Jesus.
talk about. Look at those photographs. Look at that balcony.
Oh my
This is the
God.
weekly episode of balconies in Bombay, and why that has become such a thing now. How has your week been, Suchita?
Bro, you are basically making us like Perez Hilton slash Viral Biani. Varun
Veer
Dugi is,
Bayani is the best.
dude, he
Manav
really
Manglani,
is.
Veer Bayani, Woompla. I have subscribed to all these Instagram accounts.
Oh my God. That explains the depth you bring to our Think Fast episodes, Varun.
As always, as always.
But no, that wedding was really spectacular. Can I just say I
Yeah.
am so sick of Sabyasachi outfits on Bollywood
Did you see
actresses.
this interesting article? Who put this out? No, no, article post. I think our friend Karthik Srinivasan, I think, put it up. And who's been on the podcast before. He spoke about how um, Alia's ambassador for Manyavar, right? And she wore
Yeah.
Sabyasachi. Even Virat and Anushka got married. They were both
Chopsy.
ambassadors of Manyavar and they both Sabyasachi as well. Is that
Oh
good for
man.
Manyavar? Bad for Manyavar? Who knows?
Yeah, but I think that, that very typical Sabya look of like Kundan on Polki on Kundan and that like, beach partying with
Yes.
Sindoor. It's just like, ugh. Yeah,
Maybe they were drinking coffee out of Sabyasachi Starbucks mugs as well in the wedding.
which apparently are also getting a lot of hate because they're not as
Yes.
exotic as one thought, they would be. But very cute couple, man. Like very
Yeah.
sweet. I really like their pictures.
It's interesting to see that finally this one, and I don't know, no judging on anybody else, but like it's like a star wedding which is in a balcony and not in like an international location or one of those things. So it's interesting to see that.
Yeah. Also very low key, and I think it's needed, no?
Mm,
Like I mean, I think somewhere like this, construct of like this over the top, ostentatious,
mm,
and kind of
yeah,
gross,
yeah,
horrible display of money. Indian
yeah.
weddings. It's nice to see them show a more like pared down version of the same.
Mm.
We can keep talking about the wedding, but let's not bore our listeners with the gossip that they can find on Instagram or whatever other platforms they follow. This week's been like action packed.
Mm.
I don't know how you couldn't find enough stories. I was
I
just like,
couldn't
oh my god, so much going on.
because I was only following one story.
Oh, Ralia. One to Ralia
Ralia,
sounds
Ralia.
like an STD. Like they should have really thought of another hashtag. I'm just like, guys, please think of something else.
Yes.
You should
Anyway.
think of like a cool hashtag for the both of them. Ranbir Kapoor is off the market, and there are many women, myself included, heartbroken. What a heartthrob
Mm,
he was. But there are a couple of other things that are going off the market soon, man. Apparently, Wakefit and Homelane are quote unquote in
mm,
talks for a merger, as
yeah.
reported by VC Circle, which sounds totally believable and actually would honestly also make a lot of sense given one is eating one pie of the market through home services and the other one obviously through mattresses, and both of them have been experimenting a little bit with marketplace for home and kitchen goods. So again, lots of action in the home and kitchen space. Mr. Varun Dhawan has
Yes.
invested in Cure Foods. Did you see that?
Yes, I saw that. But I think now it's almost like a regular feature, right? If you're looking at it, just the
Mm,
number of investments from celebrities and
yeah.
creators. It makes sense for a lot of these, brands to do this. They just kind of get like a celeb to kind of work with on a long term. And for the celebrities, great. Like, they get to kind of create wealth for themselves in many different ways.
Yeah.
Also, I think fits in to what, his whole fitness mantra, all that stuff out there. Although Varun Dhawan is not necessarily the epitome of fitness, I it just kind of feels a little young Salman Khan for
Young
this
Salman Khan.
decade, kind of a scenario. But a few other things happen. As always, investigations galore have been going on. Now
Yeah.
Xiaomi and I didn't realize Manu Jain had left. I kind of felt like he was still in transition. I didn't realize he had left, and now the investigations happening.
Oh, he's left. Damn. I
Supposedly,
also
yeah.
missed that.
It's a
Yeah.
former Xiaomi head Manujan, and I was like, one second, he's left. I thought he was still around, or he was in. I thought it evolved to a slightly more global role, but again, I might be
Hmm.
wrong here. We
Yeah,
both
no,
missed
but
on
there
that.
seem to be investigations everywhere because even
Yeah,
Ankiti Bose, the one
yeah,
sort of heralded CEO of Zilingo, which is a B2B marketplace based out of
yeah.
Singapore. Even
Mm,
there's been a lot of trouble brewing there with
mm.
members stepping out of boards, and she's apparently been put on some like leave of sorts, and there's some investigation
Yeah.
happening over
Shailendra
there
Singh
as
has
well.
left the board and somebody else has joined the board from
Correct.
Sequoia as well.
Correct. Yeah, but in brighter news, Super Maheshwari's first cry is apparently looking to file a $700 million IPO this month, as reported by Inc. 42. And Rapido has raised a Series D led by Swiggy, which is very, very, very interesting, given that, the bike sharing sort of platform. Obviously, all of these guys took a bit of a hit during the 2 years
Mm,
of COVID and had their own sort of way of recovery. But this really
yeah.
seems to be a way in which Swiggy is, I guess, galvanizing their 10-minute delivery. God knows, but interesting things happening all around the board.
Yeah. Yeah, and we're getting into a bunch of those this week. I'm going to tap into my second most favorite thing this week that I've been obsessing over, which is everything Twitter and Elon Musk.
Oh
It's
man,
like watching an episode of Billions, except this is real life, or rather a
yeah.
season of Billions which happened in a week.
It's like
So there are
watching
lots of
a
interesting things happening.
white boy version of like Ashneer Grover and Bharat Pay, basically. Except
Not
like shots aren't
really,
being
though. I think there's a
fired.
lot more happening there. There's a lot more happening with Elon. There's always a lot more happening there, and I've
Hmm.
actually found a few interesting pieces in this whole puzzle, and maybe why he's doing this or what he might do with Twitter. Also, like in a very random story, but I thought it's interesting is that Netflix has put up this double thumbs up button. So there was a thumbs up and a thumbs down. They took off the whole 5-star rating a while back, but there's something about the double thumbs up which could be interesting to talk about. So I'm going to dig into that. And you are tapping into a bunch of stories as well. What are you tapping into?
Yes, Queen. So apparently, pre-COVID sales are back. There was a article which featured Ashish Hemrajani, who's the CEO of
Hmm.
BookMyShow, and he
Yeah.
apparently was talking about how sales are through the roof and like traffic is off the hook and everything seems to be hunky dory there. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We're also unfortunately going to be talking about all the trouble that seems to be brewing in the startup ecosystem. There have been a massive firings across the board from the biggest companies across the board, and also it would be good to get your insights also on if I were a professional working somewhere,
Hmm.
what should I really think through when it
Yeah.
comes to switching around jobs this particular year. And
Hmm.
finally, the story that we'll close off with, at least at my end, is e-commerce is advertising behemoths. So this will be a little bit
Yeah.
about Amazon, Flipkart, and what they've been able to do as advertising platforms and not just e-com platforms.
Yeah. And I'm going to close this one off talking about live audio. Remember live audio? Something
Oh
which
my
was supposed to be
God.
the next big thing, supposed to kill podcasts, all that stuff.
Didn't
So we
kill
talked about how
shit.
Green Room has been revitalized by Spotify. It's not going to be a part of the Spotify app itself. Clubhouse is still around. I didn't realize it was. Supposedly still is. And Twitter Spaces as well. The stuff happening there as well. So lots more going on and beyond this as well. But I think this is what we're talking about this week. But before we get into any of these, take a short break. Be right back with Think Fast.
Hey everybody, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Advertising is Dead, content strategist Manish Pandey shares useful insights about the creator economy with Varun. On The Longest Constitution, it's an Ambedkar special. Priya tells us about the father of the Indian Constitution. On Shunya 1, Sheila Ditya asks Mihir Gupta, CEO and co-founder of Teachment, about his dream of changing the Indian education system. On Big Talk About Tiny Humans, Devi Shobha and Meghna share how to navigate the delicate process of LGBTQIA kids coming out to their parents. And on Tere Mere Raste, Kesho takes us to the birthplace of so many great films, Universal Studios. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you enjoyed this show or any of our other shows for that matter, do please tell a friend. Also, don't forget to rate us on any of the platforms you're listening to us on. You can check us out on YouTube as well. On ivmpodcast.com/YouTube, we have a list of all of our YouTube channels. Do check out if your favorite show is available as full video. We are also doing a small listener survey to better understand how you respond to our shows and advertising on the network. We'd really appreciate it if you could spare a few minutes to fill it out. It helps us build better shows for you. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors for this week, SBI Life Insurance, India Water Portal, and Jupiter, a digital banking app. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Welcome back to Think Fast, where we are talking about the world's most interesting version of Tony Stark. Or is it Lex Luthor or Elon Musk? It's been an interesting week, right? I mean, last week we spoke about Twitter and Elon, and it's the drama has not ended. He obviously was supposed to be part of the board. Then he said, I'm not going to join the board because if you join the board, you can't do a hostile takeover. That was the first tactic by the Twitter board to kind of get him to do this, right? And then he goes out and he says, "I want to buy 100%." Offers them, I think, a 50% plus. I forgot, 54 million per share. No, $54 per share, something like that. He's already
Yeah.
offered, and that went into a whole
54
mix over
million
there.
per share. Bro, that guy has to like
That
run the world to be able to pay that.
looks
But
like
yes,
he is running the
$54.
world right now. Looks like
Ah,
he is running the
true that,
world
true that.
lately. Yeah, $54 per share in cash. But he said also there's a caveat there where he basically said that he's going to basis him arranging the financing, which means that he's not planning to finance it himself. He's obviously going to raise
Hmm.
money for it. There's also a very interesting note. He sent a note to the SEC, which is the regulatory board, and it's public right now. But the night before, he sends it to Brett Taylor, who's the Twitter chairman of the board, as well as Jack Dorsey and a few others, where he basically gives his long reasoning as to why he bought the shares, what he thinks the future can be, the fact that he wants to take Twitter private, and by far the most interesting line that anybody should use in a negotiation, he literally writes saying, "I'm skipping straight to the end. This is my final offer."
Mm-hmm.
Which is such like I mean, you got to no matter what you think of him, that's like a great line. Like I would use that line in a movie any day. What do you think of what's been going on? I have a lot more info to give, but I thought I'll get your first thoughts.
So I have not been following the story because for me it's as boring as like the Bharat Pe saga. And my reason for saying that is, one, I think we all forget that there is still a war in Ukraine.
Yeah.
And it's been going on for over a month, and Russia refuses to give up, and no one really seems to be coming to the aid. But the point that I'm making is there are more pressing issues in the world than Elon Musk and his hissy fits, and that's what
Mm,
I'll call them, right? I think
mm,
I mean, after a point, it's just like, dude, you've got so much going for you. You are literally like launching rockets and are, revolutionizing all things around EV, this, that, and the other. And I mean, I don't know, man. It's appalling, isn't it? Like, isn't it just
mm,
like, how do you have time? One, how do you have time to do this shit? And the second is, even if you had the
yeah.
time, why are you so narcissistic? Why are you so obsessed with staying in news cycles? I mean, all of this could have very well happened under
Yeah.
the radar. So he seems like a Trump you can admire, but it's very similar characteristics. It's very like,
Mm,
I need to stay in the news.
yeah.
I don't know. I didn't. It's
Yeah.
throwing me off a bit, man.
So the thing with him is, and there are two narratives going on online, and I think that's an interesting one to look at. One narrative, exactly like what you said. He's the guy who should really be focusing on getting us to Mars, solving the whole autonomous car problem. He's literally like the robo he's built, and there's a Twitter, there's a TED conversation he had, which came out around the same time as all of this stuff going on, and I watched half of it. I haven't finished all of it, but he's literally built this robo in his gigafactory, which can pretty much you can build like thousands of cars, if not more, millions of cars eventually, without needing any human beings. Like he's
Hmm.
brought technology to that point, right? Would you want him to focus on that or on Twitter? And I think the answer is pretty clear that you want him to focus on that stuff. But
Yeah.
interestingly, I feel that what Elon Musk has realized over time is that Twitter is his biggest amplification point. Like it's his biggest marketing channel. It's how he controls his narrative. And there's something deeper. There's a Newsweek article which I came across, which is interesting. They said four things that he seems to keep talking about more and more when he talks about Twitter. He talks about taking it private. He talks about how he wants to take Twitter private because he said a lot of stuff
Hmm.
he wants to change requires it to go private, which means literally take it off this thing. Subscription versus advertising. He says you can't have public discourse with advertising. You need to have it in a subscription basis. And they already have one. Right? They have Twitter Blue, which is their service. And he's saying that people should pay much lesser and all accounts need to get authenticated. So instead of having this bot based behavior,
Yeah.
every account on Twitter needs to be authenticated so you know it's actual people. And he said people who have more following should actually be paying a subscription. So that's one thing he said. So if people have a higher following, you're giving them a media channel, they should pay for it. Everything from fighting bots to then fake news ratings was another point there. Saying most of the statistics put out on Twitter is again what again false. So you can combat that if you take it private, do a lot more work on that front. And he wants the edit button in there, which I
Yeah.
think most people want on Twitter. I think we all want an edit button in there. So stuff like this, but more than anything else, I don't buy this whole free speech piece there. But I feel some of these plans, would this transform Twitter to being the most like largest social platform out there? It could, but again, do you want him to focus on this or focus on something else? But
Yeah.
again,
So
that line,
I think one thing to add over here is, I mean, he's Elon Musk, man. He can focus on whatever the hell it is that he wants to focus on, right?
yeah,
But I think, and all the suggestions that he's made, by the way, aren't only his. A lot
yeah,
of people have been suggesting this for Twitter, right? Scott Galloway himself, who's a
yeah, yeah.
very popular host of Pivot, dear listeners, who may not be
Mm,
listening to that podcast, but you should listen to it because we are very inspired by it. But for example,
mm,
Scott Galloway has been talking about subscriptions left, right, and center as far as Twitter is concerned. So I think nothing that he's saying is like new or revolutionary. So I think this
yeah,
whole thing about, oh my God, what great ideas for Twitter is like, do there are like a million other people who use the platform often enough who have literally said these very same things. Obviously,
yeah.
he has the money and the power and the capability, to sort of make all of these things happen, for Twitter. But I think the thing that just like irks me a little bit is the way in which it's done. It's very like public square type behavior,
Mm,
which ironically
yeah.
is Twitter's use case, right? Twitter is that public square.
Which is what harms him the most, right? And actually, like he's even spoken about in the past, and this is something which kind of came up about the fact that he's not necessarily a happy person. Like he talks about the fact that he's not necessarily happy. He has so much to do. You don't want, again, it's he might be one of the most powerful voices in the world, but you're so obsessive about so many things, and you sometimes think about, okay, fine, do you want genius to focus on which areas? Where do you direct its attention? But that's where Twitter's at, and weirdly enough, I think about all the employees of Twitter. Supposedly, there's like internally there's a bit of like panic, saying if he takes over, he's just going to upend everything they've been doing,
Dude,
which they
one is
finally
that, and the
have some
second
sort of
is
streamlining.
100%. And the second thing is, can you just imagine how much talent they will lose? Because if I were working at Twitter, I don't care how amazing I thought Elon Musk is or isn't, but
Yeah,
like to literally have your company in public eye where you don't know the certainty of the future of your platform
yeah.
because there is all of this like infighting,
Poor Parag Agarwal,
going
yeah,
on. Oh man,
he just got the
it's
job.
it's a the desis are just always the ones who get screwed in the middle of all of this. But
Yes.
I want to
We
switch
can go on
gears to
about this, but moving on to other stories.
yes, yes,
Desi's getting
yes.
screwed is not a great way to end the story, but we'll move. Let's not skip to the end. Let's skip to the next story.
So the next story is also so, ladies and gents, we're going to get done with all the bad news to begin with, and
Yeah.
then we'll move on to happier and more cheerful things, and we can all giggle and laugh together. So the
Yes.
the second sad piece of news is hiring and firing and what to expect this year. So Varun and I have been talking about this for the past couple of episodes, but there definitely is a severe crunching down as far as fundraising and investing is concerned. It's already happening for a lot of Series B, C plus startups. Seed is still active, but your series A to B, B to C, that's really where things are sort of falling apart. And obviously, one consequence of the psychoticness that happened in the latter half of last year, where companies were throwing stupid amounts of money at talent, to pull them in, is of course the bloodbath that we see happening now, right? Where everyone from Misho to Unacademy to Falenco, Trell, OK Credit, Lido, whatever they call themselves. Everyone
Mm,
sort of been, cutting hundreds and hundreds of folks off of their payrolls. Now, obviously, just to add over here, cutting business lines is a fairly normal business decision that every single startup has made. Even
Yeah.
the likes of Google, which are at seriously large scales, also make decisions of cutting out verticals, trimming the fat as they go along. But
Mm.
obviously, a lot of the hoopla and the stress around this is, where is it coming from, right? Is it coming from
Yeah.
funding cycles drying up? Is it coming from a talent not necessarily being able to deliver on the kind of ROI that they were hired to do? So let me ask you this, Varun, if you had to give a piece of advice to someone who maybe is pretty happy at their job, but is
Mm.
tempted to look out, and see if there are more greener pastures that exist, what would you say, all things considered?
I think at some point in time, people are going to look at, while you might want to jump on to the fastest growing or what seems to be the next big thing kind of segments. Um, Many people go towards stuff which is more stable for the next few years. It might make more sense if you want to have, either you're saying, okay, I'm very good at what I do. I'll be able to find opportunities for myself, even if something goes sideways. But in general, focusing on more stable businesses to work for. But more importantly, look at which vertical you're a part of. I don't think it's about none of these businesses. I mean, there are a few of them which have obviously had larger issues, but they're not shut. It's not an overall business problem. It's
Hmm.
basically looking at specific lines of business as problems. And so you got to kind of figure that, is this something they're experimenting with? Is there something that they've been doing for a while? Doing for a while might be a safer bet than experimenting with for you to join. Um, but I think that's the way people might look at a little more stability for the next few years, just to be on the safer side for their own careers. But this is going to be a thing. I feel that what I also feel kind of happened is the way it's been done. Kind of also scares people, right? If things are happening back to back around the same time, you're seeing this happen to multiple companies. It also then worries people about, okay, is it a smart thing to work for a startup? Although I can't call any of these companies startups, most of them are like
Mm-hmm.
unicorn status or getting there and stuff like that. But or do you just go for like a age-old company which seems to be robust over decades and I'll just be more stable there? I think that thought will slowly start coming back.
So I think in what you've said is absolutely spot on, which is a lot of these companies. So for example, like Misho and the layoffs that they had were in a very specific sort of vertical, right? It was
Yeah.
actually in their vertical of like farm related, or
Mm.
grocery products that they had launched, and obviously they've wound that business down. Everyone did things during COVID, which they may be sort of like tempering down on right now,
Yeah.
right? So
Basically,
I
FOMO
think.
stuff like Gaurav Munjal said.
Exactly, exactly. So, 100%, a lot of this shit driven out of like, oh my God, we need to play in this category because it can be big. So, I think the advice that you've given is, fairly sound. I do think the good thing, the silver lining on all of this is I hope somewhere there is a reckoning of how two things, especially younger employees, look at their careers, because I think, thanks to the past 6 7 odd months, and not just the 6 7 odd months, but even before COVID, right, there was this rampant sort of fundraising that would happen where you'd suddenly see people, switch jobs like crazy. And the problem with a lot of this is there's also this narrative that ends up coming up on LinkedIn and Twitter and all, right, which says, something along the lines of, oh, there's nothing wrong with changing jobs and you should have an open mind and
Yeah.
experimentation is a part of youth. I think a lot of this feedback is very, very, very misguided. And I say this as someone who's actually not much older than someone who's in their, mid 20s. I mean, I've seen the cycles and we've all sort of been there, done that. I do
Mm.
think the one thing that it rationalizes is how people think of their careers. And I hope the second thing that it also does is I hope it rationalizes salaries, man, because, six
They've gone
months
insane.
ago, dude, just unaffordable. And the tragedy of the situation is, salaries are not a determinant of, are not 100% determinant of your capabilities or your worth. And I think the problem is people look at the amount that they're paid as, what their like time worth or what their capability worth is. But I think somewhere equating the work that you do to how much you earn, there has to be a decoupling of those two. And I don't mean this in a toxic way where, a company should underpay employees or, take unnecessary advantages of folks who are, determined, hardworking, loyal, etc., etc. But I think somewhere there has to be this like rationalization of how do you define work, right? And is the only definition of work, is the only definition of work equal to how much you're earning, or
Yeah.
what your appraisal looks like?
and how much are you learning? I feel what we often forget is that you might, and there's also like people just starting off getting insane salaries, right? Like a couple of
Yeah.
years in, you will also learn a lot by working with traditional companies. I feel what's happening is I have a large set of people who are skipping that learning curve, moving straight to the startup ecosystem, who are also kind of figuring things out as they're building things out. So you're going to end up with a workforce which hasn't learned traditional forms. So you're not improving traditional forms. You're coming up with newer ways to do things. But in many ways, you don't have to come up with new things. You just need to kind of perfect the wheel a little bit more. You don't
Yeah.
have to reinvent it. I think that's really where we're getting into in terms of the workforce, because you're seeing that the people out there, people don't know how things were done, but they're trying to figure out how things should be done while trying to do something now. And I think that's where it's going to be a larger issue from a workforce standpoint, even like I would say a year or two down the line.
So I want to make this conversation a little broader, for the next couple of minutes. I think I saw this tweet recently by the guy who runs Stoa School, Raj. I'm
Mm,
forgetting his last name,
mm,
and
mm.
he said this really interesting, and it's not fully related to this story, but somewhere related to how people define, work, right? He
Yeah,
basically posted something along the lines of, like the problem now is people are so scared about saying that they are enjoying their work and they're happy to
yeah,
work on weekends, or happy to work longer hours, because the second you say something like that, you're going to be cancelled for, like, toxic work
yeah.
culture and exploitation and this, that, and the other. But don't you feel somewhere like just the conversation around what work is and what, work
Yeah.
life needs to be has just gone totally out of whack?
It's You can blame the pandemic partly because I feel the pandemic took the entire mix of, because there was work hours and those home hours, right? You would spend more
Hmm.
time in the office. It felt like a defined amount of hours. Okay, are you overworking yourself? Now, because it's a mixture of things. Well, obviously, a lot of startups have moved to 100% capacity working out of their offices. Um, while the lines have got super blurry, I feel at some point we've also, while we're worried to say it, we're still making people do it.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's
Hmm.
the difference. Is that it's not like people aren't being made to work weekends. People aren't being made, but you don't talk about that. It's on one end, the badge value of hustle culture comes out often enough. On
Yeah.
the other end, there's this. There is a middle ground which is doing things in a planned, structured format and not seeming frantic for growth. And I think it all stems back into one simple thing, right? Like if you raise way too much capital, you are going to come to a point where you're running after growth so much that all
Yeah.
structure goes out the window, all long-term planning goes out the window. All you worried about is how can I hyper grow right now, and that
Yeah.
leads to chaos. That's literally what it is.
Damn, listeners,
This is
Varun
a bit of a
actually learned something. Are you
dark move,
okay? Oh my God, look at
dark move
you
for
being
me.
all like perspective. Wow, wow,
Yes,
Taj.
yes. मेरे
So
अंदर
much
का
from Ralia.
no, I was having a chat with someone. This is weirdly came from Twitter when somebody actually put up saying, because the number of I forgot who tweeted. I think Manish Pandey tweeted it saying, how many new age media companies are you meeting where people don't
Hmm.
respond to emails on time, seem to have a lack of a work ethic and a bunch of stuff there. Why do you think that happens? And I said mainly because they haven't learned. Like all of us worked in traditional companies,
That is
we
true.
hated
Yeah.
most of what it was. So we said, well, let's
Yeah.
do it better. There's an
Yeah.
entire set who haven't worked in those companies, and now
Yeah.
they're like, there is no structure. That's the problem. Just using Notion is not structure. So I'm like ranting here, but using Notion is not structure. Notion is fucking complicated for no reason.
Oh my God, guys, we have successfully made Varun say the F word today. It's not me, it came from him.
Oh man, I hate
Yeah, this is
Notion.
what Jobs
I
does.
hate it.
But in any case, your story next, sir.
Oh yes, sorry, my Notion. It's a slightly happier story. I will go move away from my rantiness right now. And it's basically it's a random pick for a story, but I thought it'd be fun to talk about. So Netflix recently announced a two thumbs up button. Right. They used to be a don't like this and I like this. Now there's a two thumbs up, which basically says I really like this or I love this. Um, so there's an interesting stat here that skip intro button on Netflix is pressed 136 million times a day. 136 million times
Wow.
a day. Right. Which is basically 195 cumulative years are saved by skipping intros daily. So
Oh my
So there's a
God.
whole conversation about Netflix buttons and how
Mm-hmm.
that has so much real estate, and then poor people who make those intros. I'm thinking of the entire industry which makes these beautiful intros which you watch once and then you skip every time. But more than I'm going beyond that number, which kind of blew my mind when I saw it for the first time. The simple fact that this whole difference between like and love is a great way to replace the 5-star rating, because if you get a
Hmm.
5-star rating, you realize you feel bad. You never do a 0, we always do a 3. So you never
Yeah.
really get the right picture. Here it's like and love. I think that's an easier choice. What do you think?
So, I find this world super, super, super fascinating because obviously it's very close to, what like we think and how we operate as a platform, right? Because I think a lot of the future of how people communicate, wouldn't just be in your typical rating system of like 1 to 5 or sorry, 0 to 5 or 0 to 10. But I think more than just, getting a reaction out of people, sometimes it is looking at like more tacit hints that come from users, right? So, and Netflix also does this very well, where I haven't rated a show ever, but then they have this matching index, right, where they'll say,
Hmm.
okay, if you like this, there's a 98% chance that you will also like, why.
Yeah.
And also Netflix, though they're more publicly, a lot of their PR is around like their culture and this, that, and the other. There are very, very, very strong data engines.
Yeah.
That sort of underlie how Netflix operates, right? So I remember I was talking to someone about this. I don't know if this is like public information or whatever, but for instance, they will sort of monitor how much time a particular user is spending on like a genre or a title, and
Yeah.
accordingly take a call on programming, categories of programming, so on and so forth. So
Yeah.
I think this move is interesting, but more than Netflix's buttons or lack thereof, I think the greater conversation over here is how, like, you don't have to get consumers to like literally click on something or tap on something or declare their preference. So much
Hmm.
of it can be gauged just by seeing where are consumers spending their time. What is a drop off? What's a trigger that makes them switch from one genre to the other? And all of this can be done without asking the consumer, but just by watching how a consumer
Yeah.
interacts with your product or your platform.
I think what's also interesting is that they were actually asked, "Do you are you going to do a 2 thumbs down button as well?" And they
Oh
said maybe
God.
not sometime soon,
What would you give a
which I
two
would give
thumbs
to a
down
few
to?
series
Like which ones?
on
Bridgerton
Netflix.
season 2.
I haven't seen it. I
Oh,
didn't
so
finish season
bad.
1 also, so I'm like I'm not necessarily the audience. But what did I give 2 thumbs down to, which I saw recently, which I did not like. Actually, I'm not like a hater in general, so I don't
Hmm.
think I would hate anything except for Sacred Games season 2. I would
Oh,
give it
that
a
was
double
awful.
thumbs down. Yes.
Yeah.
After that great season 1, I'm like, yeah, that's the only one I would give. I don't know what they were smoking, if that was the reason. But anyway, I'm in a bit of a
Yeah.
mood today, aren't I?
You really are. Look at you being all cheery. Wow, Varun is a change man. No,
Is
so
this
so
vitamin C I'm drinking, or is there something in this vitamin C? I don't know. But for people who are watching the video version of
he
this,
says he's drinking vitamin C, but we know what he's actually consuming, ladies and gents. And for that,
yes,
listen to any of the jokes I've made in the past 5, 6
yes.
episodes. But
I have a
getting back to your
question.
story,
I have
yeah,
a question. Do you skip the intro always, or do you sometimes watch a show and like the intro enough that you want to see it?
I usually always skip the intro. And I feel very bad while doing it because I'm just like, there are a lot of people that put a lot of work into this, but like, yeah, congratulations, guys.
Think about Game of Thrones. I think the only
Hmm.
show which I used to actually watch the intro, because the thing with the Game of Thrones intro was it would change basis which houses the story was going to revolve around in that episode. So if
Hmm.
you actually saw the intro, you would say, okay, it's going to be about this, 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 and this. That's the only intro I used to watch because it actually connected to something which happened in the show. So maybe a little tactic people should use more. But some titles are so great. Like I just love some of the title sequences. I can go on and on and on. But again, I can geek out on these things a lot. But before I geek out more on this, what is your next story? But or do we need to take a break right now?
We need to
Maybe
take
we
a
should take
break,
a break
sir.
right. We'll take a break right now, and I will calm my thoughts and drink some more vitamin C, and be right back with Think Fast. Welcome back to Think Fast. Where Suchita, what do you have for us next after my scintillating outburst after having vitamin C last segment?
Is it vitamin C or is it Gaumutra? Be honest.
Gaumotra's got a nice kick to it, though. Have you ever had it? I've had it.
Yuck, bro,
It's a
sick.
little, it's a little tangy. खट्टा है थोड़ा सा हल्का सा
Oh
खट्टा.
my God, वो घास खा खा के यही होता
Yeah.
है, bro.
Yeah.
But in any
Well, what is it called?
case,
Vintage. What is that? Cherry oak aged Gaumotra.
Oh my God. Okay, guys, before we discuss our users talking about cow urine, see, everyone's getting into the mood now. We're like waking up and like getting all happy.
Yeah.
Guys, my next story is pre COVID sales are back. And I'm just going to kick off
Yeah.
with a couple of data points over here, which is Book My Show recently, released some amount of information on what their comeback has been. And apparently, the company recorded its highest ever monthly ticketing sales in March of 2022 on the back of theater releases, obviously the IPL. And
Mm.
other live events. They apparently also recorded their highest monthly active user count at 70 million, more than pre COVID
Mm.
times, and its highest ever traffic and consumption demand, with about 250 million customer visits per month over the past couple of months. Obviously, Book My Show went through very, very, very turbulent times through COVID, and understandably so, given their business was all about, online to offline.
Yeah.
But seem to have really made a comeback, man. Are you
Yeah.
seeing people, throng the streets?
Yeah, yeah. People are out and about. I've been to a few malls recently. Malls have been full. New stores opening up. Like I've literally seen like a bunch of new stores open up near home as well in recent times. So there's a lot more of that happening. I still don't know, and that's a stat I'd love to know, is how much are people just getting out and how
Hmm.
much are people actually buying?
Hmm.
Because while you're saying sales are there, and that's why if sales are back, I want to understand which segments they're at. Because I've gone out, gone to like let's say a clothing store or gone to some of
Yeah.
those, and some feel like there's a constraint of the amount of options you have and kind of then leave the store and buy stuff online on the way back home. But I might be a minority on that front.
So
That's what I've seen. But
actually,
I think,
yeah, it's interesting you
sorry, go
say
on, please.
that because I was talking to a couple of my friends who are in, who are in retail and run
Mm.
brands who majorly focus on offline, and all of them have also been talking about exactly this, which is traffic is back, but your revenue, especially in categories like apparel, lifestyle, etc., etc., are
Yeah.
closer to that 70 to 80% of what they were pre-COVID. So events 100% are back because again it's cheapest form of entertainment, that 250 rupee ticket that you're using to go and watch RRR or whatever else.
Mm.
But you're absolutely right. I think the retail boom is still a little lacking.
But Book My Show is interesting, right? I remember when they launched Book My Show stream
Hmm.
in the middle of COVID, it suddenly become a streaming platform of sorts where you just buy like a ticket but watch it online. I
Hmm.
actually used that for a bunch of movies, and I actually thought it was a
Interesting.
very reasonably well made platform considering I don't know if they were building it beforehand,
Yeah.
but I used it a bunch of times. I watched a bunch of movies on that. I don't know if I would go back to it now. Again, default, you go to Book My Show, you go to buy a ticket to watch a movie because I've seen like many movies, although I missed RRR in theaters. But I think it was an interesting way for them to kind of still stay afloat of sorts, because obviously for them, like you said, primarily events and movies.
Yeah.
And now it would be a good time for them. And Ashish has always been one of those people who focuses on profitability, building a business that is robust, foundation led.
Yeah.
So I think the worst might be done for Book My Show. And I
Yep.
think
Yep.
it
Yep.
will be good going ahead.
No, for sure. In fact, there have been a couple of events happening in Delhi, both in F&B as well as in, food, etc., in like 40-degree heat. And tens of thousands of people
Yeah.
have thronged to venues. It is just
I'm going to
like
a beer festival tomorrow.
unbelievable.
I'm like,
Yeah, there's beer festivals, there's gin festivals, there's like, fashion bazaars and this, that, and the other. And
yes.
people are, up and about, really, really, really with a vengeance.
Hmm.
I think obviously Book My Show is an
Boner
example
Med
of how.
Fiesta has not happened yet.
Oh my God. Guys, Varun is taking his own case. I don't even have to do anything on today's show. I love this.
I'm
I love
waiting for it.
this.
Somebody please
Yes.
do Boner Med Fiesta. I want to attend.
Oh my God, that sounds absolutely horrible. But in any case, you threw me off my fucking tracks. Jesus.
How does this
Boner
feel?
Med
How does this
Fiesta.
feel?
Oh my God. Okay. Yeah. So what I was saying was, obviously Book My Show and events is one thing, but if you look at the US, I think what's
Hmm.
very interesting is a lot of your retailers are looking at offline through a totally different lens, right? So, ladies and gents, if you remember back in 2018 and 2019, every conference that would happen, one panel discussion on every like consumer facing conference would be on what's the future of retail, right? Because
Mm,
a lot of retail has been fairly boring, very like, cut to cut. Obviously, a lot of retailers have shut down, and significantly so through COVID. And I was reading
mm,
this other really interesting article which spoke about how in the US, a lot of large companies, and they gave the example of Mango, are really looking at offline not only as a revenue generator but also as a way to drive discovery and to drive consummation of that purchase online. Another
mm,
very popular beauty company called Glossier, who've
mm.
been launching their own sort of retail stores. They also look at their offline as an experience center, right?
Yeah.
You saw Fab India, more closer to home in India, also sort of double down on their experience centers where they have Fab Cafe, this, that, and the other, versus just their multi-category sort of format stores. So
Mm,
I think the great thing that's come out of this is people are really asking themselves, what's the job to be done of an offline store,
mm. Yeah.
and when consumers do start coming offline and spending in throngs like they used to,
Yeah.
what should an offline experience be like?
Yeah, I think take a thing out of Apple's notebook and just use that, right? They've been
Yeah.
experienced stores before the pandemic as well. I think that will be the way to go. Like look at like Decathlon, look at these places. They've actually survived because people
IKEA.
go there not just to buy.
Yeah.
Exactly. People go, Fab India again a great example, like you said. I even like people like Pepperfry, etc. Right? They have actually
Hmm.
if you go to a store and not buy online, they're going there for the experience. So I guess that's the way to go as you move ahead. Speaking of experience, oh, sorry, you had a point.
No, no, no. I actually had one small point over there. Like, there's this really, really cool brand based out of the US, which you should check out. It's called Revolve.
Hmm.
And they are an online website, and they do a lot of like trend based fashion. And in fact, they've launched a lot of apparel brands with popular influencers in the US. So, like, there's Camilla. Kaleo, then there's Army Song. So they've launched a lot of collaborative brands with these influencers on their platform, and again done it very well. They have this really interesting format for retail where they've launched this thing called the Revolve Social Club, where
Hmm.
basically their offline store is like it's not even a store, it's like a events venue. And
Wow.
the whole purpose of that venue is to bring influencers together to do events and use those events as a way to create online chatter. Right, so use offline as a vehicle to drive more user generated content on the internet, and drive more experiential led conversations online, not even commerce, experiential led conversations online. So a lot
Hmm.
of really cool examples coming out of the US where everyone is sort of being forced to reimagine what does offline look like, and if you don't
Hmm.
have all the money and the cash flow to spend on offline stores, how can you make offline reduce your customer acquisition costs or your conversation acquisition costs online? I like that term. I'm going to use it more often. Conversation
Conversation
acquisition cost.
acquisition costs.
Okay. Your next
Basically,
story, sir.
not for fuck boys to use in conversations.
Acha, theek hai. Okay, done. Let's go.
Let's
Next
move
one.
ahead. Move on to the next one. Have you been on to do you remember live audio or whatever live audio streaming was at some point of time? It was like the hot new thing. Clubhouse was taking over the world, and we were like, we're going to live in the Clubhouse metaverse, and all podcasts were going to die. Do you remember that time?
Yes, when like everyone was ringing the bell saying no one's going to listen to podcasts anymore and podcasts are so boring, and live audio is so spontaneous, but that lasted
Yeah.
all of 3.5 seconds.
Yeah, and science businesses as well, except for Twitter, which I think did a smart thing by integrating Spaces really smartly into the Twitter app.
Hmm.
And that's still been going strong. It's not like it's a massive thing, but there's enough happening there that you always see a few interesting spaces kind of going on. Everything from press conferences to announcements to random late night conversations. I've been a part of some of these, and they've been fun to be a part of. But Clubhouse obviously has still been around, but seems to have really like gone down. And like I went back to the platform for this story, and I was like, is there somebody still there? And there were a few Bollywood discussions and some random, slightly non-veg conversation rooms, if you that is the term to use for it. Do you know what non-veg conversation rooms
Oh
are?
my God, yes, Varun. We are all over 22. We understand what that means.
Yes. But then there was Green Rooms rather, Green Room, which Spotify acquired. Green Room used to be a platform primarily for sports, so it was live audio,
Hmm.
but for sports only. It was going to be their Clubhouse competitor. They acquired it, and then there was crickets because nobody was on it.
Yeah.
They're reviving that, but they're basically moving it. They're calling it Spotify Live, and they're bringing it into the Spotify app itself, which I think makes sense, right? They realize this
Yeah.
is not working as a standalone piece. They never really pushed it out as much, to be honest. They just rebranded the color. The color became green like Spotify. But it's going to become a part of this. I think that's an interesting move for them. They're kind of making this the hub of all things audio, right? You want live, you want podcast, you want music. They also have a few interesting formats like music plus talk, etc., which is there. So it's an interesting move for them to revitalize this whole space. While Twitter moves in the other direction, and so LinkedIn, which has launched their own version of this, still in beta testing, but they call it live audio events. They don't call it
Hmm.
streaming. They're saying
Yeah.
it's an audio event you're doing. That they call it events because it makes sense for LinkedIn to call it that. So, what do you think about this entire audio space now?
I don't know. Obviously there was a lot of hoopla around live audio, and I
Mm,
remember, every platform and its mother was launching a live audio, platform within their app, right? I can't
mm.
remember. Did Facebook try something? I remember
Yeah,
one of
yeah.
these, like,
Facebook tried it.
companies. Yeah, Facebook tried it. IG would have done some random stuff on the side,
No,
but
ID just increase the number of people who could be on their live. So before it used to only be two. I think now about 4 to 6 people can be on it, if I remember right.
got it. So yeah, so obviously, there's this excitement around it. I definitely think the platform where it makes the most amount of sense is Spotify.
Hmm.
And I think, with Spotify's foray even into videos, right, which we had spoken about in one of our past episodes, where even the Joe Rogan show, you can now watch the video on Spotify, while like listening to the podcast.
Hmm.
I think Spotify seems to be best poised to make this happen.
Hmm. Yeah.
What I will say, and I know we've discussed this a bunch of times, but Twitter is where the influencers are, right? I think where Spotify will run into a wall is, dude, sure, you've got the, you've got the base and you've got the technology, but do you
Yeah.
have the proprietary influencers at scale as is needed to make this happen? And maybe one thing that could work for them is all of these exclusive contracts that they've signed with Joe Rogan, or that girl who runs
Alex
Call Your
Cooper and
Daddy. Yeah, Alex Cooper and all these other guys. Apparently, like Meghan Markle and Prince Harry also have some exclusive deal with Spotify, as do the Obamas. So I think what could be interesting for them is if they can get some of this high decibel content creators to create some traction around these lives. I can imagine Joe Rogan actually being pretty fucking fantastic
yeah,
for
yeah,
exactly this initiative and
yeah,
endeavor of
yeah.
theirs. But I do think, I do think where, for better or for worse, this is likely to see the most amount of adoption from a creator's perspective. I think will end up being a mix of like Twitter and maybe to some extent LinkedIn, right? LinkedIn, I don't
Yeah.
see adoption from consumers. I see adoption from a lot of like,
It's for
LinkedIn
companies.
creators. Yeah, exactly. So, I don't know how much content, can be created there, but yeah,
I think LinkedIn honestly is going to be a lot more about like one of the best use cases on Twitter and LinkedIn I've seen is that don't do a press conference, just do it on a stream, like do an audio
yeah,
stream. In that sense, you don't even have to do video. In that sense, you can just do it off audio. You can have just call-ins and stuff like that. So that's where I think that part will kind of go. But interesting part I feel for Spotify is this could be their way to really finally also take over radio because
hmm,
radio is live, right? You have live call in, you have a lot of that
yeah,
stuff. They've had, and I think, and this is me like randomly trying to mix two features, right? Their music plus talk is the most underrated podcast feature, which is used very little. Where basically you can have,
hmm,
someone talk and you can put songs in between. And because they're Spotify, they have music. But imagine
hmm,
if that could be live and you could play music in between. That is like a live radio show you can interact with. Like I would
yeah,
listen to that, right? And
yeah,
I feel that's I mean, some of those could actually make sense because I
yeah.
feel
I
that
like that
at some
idea.
point we haven't disrupted live audio and live radio in so long. It's kind
Yeah,
of feels like more of the same. They have the talent, like you said.
yeah,
I'm excited. I'd love to try doing a live audio thing with music
hmm,
if I have time to do more things. But
yeah,
I feel what will be interesting is that there's also one more news to Spotify. They acquired a bunch of podcast measurement firms. They
hmm,
acquired Chartable, and I forget the other company they acquired. So they've done that as well. So there've been a lot of action from Spotify in terms of acquisitions, integrations, but at some point you need to make all of this kind of work together,
Yeah.
because I mean, at some point they're still doubling down a lot more on audio, and the video part of their podcast platform still has a very few podcasts. So they seem to be going in that direction, considering YouTube's on its way.
Yeah. So, guys, last story for today is my story on e-com as advertising behemoth. So, for those of you who have been living under a rock, Amazon is the third largest advertising platform in the US, after Google and Facebook, of course. And even in India, in fact, you're seeing the likes of Flipkart and Amazon collectively being able to deliver on advertising revenue as high as close to about 4,000 crores in FY 2021. In fact, if you look more specifically at Flipkart, whose numbers I am trying to find, where did they go?
Flipkart's number, Flipkart's number.
Here, yeah, found it. Yeah. Uh, Sorry, I'll just say that again. So, for example, even if you look at Flipkart more specifically, right? Flipkart Internet's income from advertisement services climbed to 1386 crores in
Mm,
FY21 from about 1,000 crores in FY20. You're
mm,
also obviously seeing, though there are no public numbers available, but you're seeing the likes of Swiggy and Zomato also monetize fairly robustly through sponsored ads and promoted ads on their like listing pages. So if you search for something on Zomato or Swiggy, chances are you'll see promoted listings come up. And obviously the payment against a lot of this is not just in the form of commission, but it's also in the form of like flat fees that you end
yeah.
up paying. I saw this very interesting tweet yesterday about how Misho in fact is also being able to as per some senior executives and the source being the Ken, they are being able to break even per order, not based on commission that they're making on that order, but based on advertising fees that they're taking from merchants. So again, all of this has been reported. What the actual facts are, no one is fully sure with
Mm,
respect to Misho's case. But I think what's obviously fascinating is the world of advertising has always looked at one and only one benchmark, right, which is
yeah.
what your monthly active users and what your daily active users and what percentage of them will I be able to engage and interact with. And of course, the lens that ecom brings is it brings the whole aspect of performance marketing, which has been like the poster child of all things digital, right? So why digital and why not print or radio? Because it can be measured, you can track, blah blah, bullshit. And obviously you see the culmination of this come in e-commerce. So I have a question for
Mm,
you as someone who's been in advertising for so long, given that you're
mm.
turning 40 now in 3 months.
Yes.
um,
4 months. 4 months.
4 months. So, when you see where clients are spending money, what is the use case of e-com platforms, and would you classify them spending money on e-com platforms as advertising or as, cost of sales?
So it's a mixture, to be honest. That those lines have blurred. Now most agencies are looking at commerce as being, and I don't think most of us have stopped calling it e-com. We just call it commerce, because at some point you have to look at modern trade, which is what's happening in physical stores, but also have to look at what's happening on e-com. And the merging of the two is what we're kind of looking at, saying how we can you track that. So while if you look at ad agencies as ad networks, one of the biggest investments has been into everything from CX and commerce. That's really the growing areas of like what are the things you need to double down on and grow more as functions. Those would be the two that has been the most, I would say, the most action happening in the last few years, because everything is tech driven now in the advertising business, right? We're looking at these as specific numbers. We're creating content for that. So the more and more this happens, clients are looking at this from a very hybrid standpoint. Depends on the brand though. That's the only
Hmm.
caveat I'll give. There's some brands which are so clearly still like physical store focused because their audience isn't as prevalent in the e-com side. They go a lot more in the traditional form of the mix. But the number of clients we've had who launched digital first brands and stuck to being digital only is
Hmm.
very high. It's just scaled over the last like 5 6 years, and that's happening more and more because if you're a large conglomerate, you can launch a digital first brand, test it out into the market, understand what's happening, look at the data, kind of play around with dealing with like 3 4 smaller cohorts of consumers. You're doing 16 20 cohorts of consumers, right? You can really
Yeah.
go deep into the data and break it up. And it's been an exciting time to kind of look at how that's evolving. But one of the key things here is that the more and more you do this, you realize that this is actually the largest part of the advertising business now.
Yeah.
As much as we talk about the bigger creative from a brand building standpoint, which still holds a lot of value, a large part of what we're doing is really doing this, saying we're really focusing on commerce, pushing stuff out there from creative that lends to commerce is where the ad business is headed.
Yeah, yeah. No, and I really like that you say that, because if you had to sort of juxtapose this to, say, for instance, Facebook, right?
Mm,
Facebook's big bet has been small to mid-sized businesses, because they are the ones who need traffic to go to their
yeah,
websites, right?
yeah,
And the only and the irony of this whole situation is, it's almost as if platforms like Facebook and Google have helped build Amazon up, and the one thing that's
yeah,
likely to be their biggest, Achilles heel in all of this is going to be your large FMCG brands that typically contribute anywhere in between 40 to 60, 70, 80% of revenues for a lot of these
mm,
guys. A
yeah,
lot of that money, chances are, will, flow over to where the quote unquote conversion is happening, right? Because a lot of your, large iconic brands all over the world, a lot of them obviously, chances are, will spend more on marketplaces than necessarily driving, revenues towards their own, website. So really, what needs to happen over here to sort of resurrect, Facebook, Instagram, Google, and the likes, is this whole, shop directly from businesses. So like the whole quote
yeah,
unquote Shopify movement, um,
yeah.
that seems to really be like the, last
And that's
hope.
happening a lot, by the way. I'm hearing more and more people who are saying, I want to first focus on building that out because the worry with
Hmm.
Amazon is you're in a sea of products.
Yeah,
So you have to spend a lot more. And I feel on the other end, what's really happening is performance marketing isn't doing as well as it used to. Because of
100%. Yeah.
constraints Google and Apple have done. You can't get the kind of like, and everybody's competing, right? There's so many startups there, everybody has a D2C brand. So because of that as well, people are being a lot more careful with this.
Hmm.
Plus also Amazon tends to take too many of these products and make their own versions of it. So that's a whole
Correct.
different problem.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm not making this as a case for Amazon, because, like you
Mm,
correctly said, Amazon has multiple different issues, and most companies are wary of having a single largest source of revenue, right? So,
yeah.
100% companies will always diversify, where they pull revenue from. But I think one thing that, platforms like Google and Facebook will have to figure out is what is their competitor to Amazon, right? So, for example, Google
Mm,
has been spending a lot on, on their version of, shop and product discovery. So, Google's, I mean, even if you do quick Google searches, they've doubled down on product discovery as opposed to just, link discovery. In the Facebook
mm,
ecosystem, you obviously see Instagram tripling down on ways in which they can make conversion happen through, IG shop. So I think somewhere it almost seems like these two universes of content commerce, will converge, and what the final results look like, for Amazon or for Facebook, will be fairly interesting to watch over the next couple of years.
yeah, I agree. It's going to be an interesting time. Speaking of interesting times call for interesting breaks. And because right after that, we have to come back with recommendations. And I still have to think about what my recommendation is. Have you thought about yours?
Yes, queen.
Acha, okay. So we'll take a break and right back with Think Fast. Welcome back to Think Fast, where I have no idea what my recommendation is. So I'm still thinking, what is yours?
So, guys, I have two recommendations. One is Amy Schumer's show called Life in Beth. I think it's absolutely fantastic. It's this very like melancholic memoir of sorts.
Mm,
I think partly inspired by her life, but very like, I won't say dark. That's the wrong word, but it's very different to what you would typically expect of Amy Schumer. But masterclass writing, and just a really like lovely series. So, Life in Beth, and I've already recommended these guys, but I will, for those of you who haven't seen The Dropout, please watch The Dropout. It Amanda Seyfried in it is class act, and I hope she gets that Emmy that she very, very, very well deserves.
do you listen to My First Million, the podcast?
No.
So that would be my recommendation for this week. It's been around for a while. Basically,
Hmm.
Shanpuri and Sampar hosted just basically both of them doing this. Initially, just started as a fun thing over Zoom and it's become a podcast. But some great insights on just like how specific things in the business market are evolving. Like they did an entire like 40-minute rundown on the Elon thing. That's where I got a lot of the info which I got from. and they'll even do like interesting takes on like they did creator-led brands, but they didn't pick just your regular creators. They said, how has like a Dwayne Johnson built it? How has a Ryan Reynolds built it? How has someone else kind of at a different scale kind of built it? So great podcast. I mean, it's on YouTube and on all audio platforms, but I watch it on YouTube. It's a lot of fun to catch up. So My First Million is my
Nice one.
recommendation.
Lovely. And with that,
And I think that is it.
love
I'm going to
right under 60 minutes. Right under 60
Yes.
minutes.
And right just in time for me to head for Bonomed Fiesta.
Oh my God. I appreciate you taking your own case.
I am a loner without a boner.
Oh my God, Varun, your wife is going to slap you after this. Guys, we need to make a clip of this and send it to Pooja. Oh
This is
my
what happens when you
God.
get close to 40. This is what happens when you get close to 40. Midlife
Yes,
crisis
it does.
time.
Oh my God. Okay. Toodles,
Okay,
my
guys.
poodles.
Toodles.